I've been having this thought for most of 2022. What would the animation industry be like if Disney wasn't around? Yeah, I know some people believe it is not a big deal, and maybe other animation studios can have more of a spotlight. While this may sound true, I believe Disney has to be the leader in animation, or else the industry would die. Sure, it may not be true, and we will never know, but since they influence many people from around the country and world to work in the industry, I think it would be a major deal to not have Disney. Allow me to go more in depth. The 1930s were technically known in America as the golden age of animation, especially for Disney, as they made their first animated feature film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which grossed $4.2 million domestically. Then in the 1940s, Disney produced four films in its golden era. Sadly, due to World War II, the next two films, being Pinocchio and Fantasia, were huge flops, putting the studio at risk of bankruptcy. 1941, some of the Disney animators went on strike, causing Disney to lose hundreds of employees. Now that he lost most of his crew and a lot of money, Disney released Dumbo, hoping to make a profit out of it, and managed to pull it off. Although it has been revealed that when RKO, Disney's distributor at the time, asked Disney to add another 10 minutes to the film, he said he couldn't afford that as it would cost him another $500,000. Therefore, it is very likely that if Dumbo failed in the box office, Bambi, Disney's next film at the time, would probably be canceled and the studio would go bankrupt. So, with all this said, what would happen to the animation industry if Disney actually went bankrupt? Well, after doing the research, I found out there would be four major film studios that would try their best to keep the industry alive, only for it to have a longer Bronze Age in animation. Let's talk about those studios. The first of these studios is UPA. Founded in 1941 after the Disney animators strike, UPA started making World War II training cartoons. But when the war ended in 1945, they started to try and rival Warner Bros. MGM in being the leader in the animation industry. The studio managed to win a few Oscars in the 1950s for Best Animated Short. However, in 1959, UPA released their first animated feature film called 1001 Arabian Nights, which was based off Aladdin and was not considered a success at the box office. UPA did try again in 1962 with their film Gay Puree, but was unsuccessful at the box office too. Now, this did not get UPA out of business, as they played it safe by producing short films and TV shows until the late 1970s. For the rest of the studio's run, it just distributed Japanese films until 2000, where it closed for good. The second studio that would exist without Disney would be MGM Visual Arts. Founded by Chuck Jones, a former Warner Bros. Cartoons animator, the studio was well known for the Dr. Seuss television specials and Tom and Jerry shorts throughout the 60s. One of their shorts, The Dot in the Line, won an Oscar in 1965. The studio also made a film in late 1970 called The Phantom Tollbooth, which was based off the 1961 novel of the same name by the late Norton Juster. Sadly, the film was disliked by Juster and flopped at the box office, causing the studio to close its doors after 8 years of business. While the first two studios I have mentioned either went out of business or abandoned animation projects in the 1970s, the next two studios helped the industry stay afloat throughout the 80s, 90s, and part of the 2000s. One of those studios are Hanna-Barbera, which is a studio you probably expected me to talk about eventually in this video. Now, while this studio mostly spent time making television shows, they also produced 8 animated feature films. The first film from Hanna-Barbera was Hey There, It's Yogi Bear, grossing $1.1 million on its release in the summer of 1964. It is even kind of special in animation, as it was the first animated film to be based off a cartoon, that being Yogi Bear. The second film, A Man Called Flintstone, was considered to be a series finale to the 1960 television show The Flintstones. Unfortunately, it wasn't that much of a box office success compared to the previous film. 7 years later, Hanna-Barbera released Charlotte's Web, which made $2.4 million at the box office. Then the 1980s rolled around, and let's just say things were at rock bottom. The fourth film, Heidi Song, was a box office bomb as it made $5 million on a $9 million budget. Also, to add insult to injury, it received negative reviews by critics. If you thought that's not good, nope, it gets worse. In 1986, GoBot's Battle of the Rock Lords was released and grossed a measly $1.3 million in the box office. 1 year later, Ultraman The Adventure Begins showed itself in theaters and wasn't successful in the box office either. When 1990 rolled around, the company made the most well-known film in their 44-year run. That film was Jetsons the Movie, which grossed $20.3 million. But that's not saying much as Universal, the film's distributor, used $12 million for marketing and $8 million for the budget, causing the film to be a box office disappointment. The final film made by the studio was 1993's Once Upon a Forest. However, the film was another flop since it made $6.5 million on a $13 million budget. Hanna-Barbera continued to make television shows until 2001 when one of the founders, William Hanna, passed away. To conclude, Hanna-Barbera may not be good at making profits from their films, but since they produced exactly 175 television shows, I could see the studio being the most influential out of the three studios I mentioned so far. Now we've hit the final studio, being Bill Melendez's Peanuts specials. Now, for those of you who don't know his career in the animation industry, he worked in Disney from 1938 to the strike I mentioned earlier in 1941, then worked in Warner Bros. Cartoons and UPA before deciding to adapt the Charles M. Schulz comics in TV specials and even a few movies. From 1965, which was the beginning of these specials and movies, to 2006, where Melendez retired, he produced a total of 44 specials and 4 movies. When talking about his feature-length films, the first film was released in 1969 and made an impressive $12 million in the box office over a $1.1 million budget. However, the next film, Snoopy Came Home, was a flop, making under $1 million at the box office. The final 2 films, Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown, and Bon Voyage, Charlie Brown, and Don't Come Back, were considered to be moderate successes as they made $3 million and $2 million in the box office, respectively. After those 2 films, Melendez continued to make 25 more Peanuts specials until his aforementioned retirement in 2006. In my opinion, the animation industry would officially crumble in 2006. Now, I know you guys think that makes no sense, but hear me out. Going beyond 2006 in the industry without Disney would be nearly impossible to do since people were switching to computer animation. And considering how the first CGI studios were founded by former Disney alumni, John Lasseter and Jeffrey Katzenberg are a couple examples, it would be warranted to have Disney still be there. There might be a few other studios that might have also been around, but in my head, I can only think of 4 studios. Anyways, that's it for this video. What do you think the industry would be like if Disney went out of business early? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. As for now, this is Animation Fan 04 signing off.